Welcome back. We're finishing up New York City and Manhattan, and the next thing the first thing is we talked about Kips Bay and that little battle there. Well, the British they got what they wanted. They got Manhattan, and so they're hanging out down here. And so on the night of the 20th and 21st, something happens, and Manhattan starts to burn. Over 500 houses are burned, some stores and stuff like that. The British think it was set by the rebels. No one really knows how it started. But two interesting points is that the Trinity Church, which is still standing today, um, the only thing that burned on it was its roof. The roof collapsed in, and that church you can go visit. It's in Lower Manhattan. It's been completely rebuilt, and George Washington's pew is still there, and you can sit in it if you want to sit where George sat. The other thing is that Washington needed some spies, and so he enlists a young man from, of all places, East Haddam, Connecticut, right down the river here, a guy by the name of Nathan Hale. And young Nathan Hale is not much of a spy, doesn't have any spy experience, and he's got some burn marks on his face. So he's kind of recognizable, doesn't blend in, and to make things worse, his cousin is on the staff of General Howe. So he gets picked up in the British try to find who set the fire, and he gets picked up because he's got some fire burning stuff on him, some I don't know what they call them, fire bombs. So anyway, so he finally admits to being a spy, and he's hung on September the 22nd. And so he's the first American spy to be hung, and he makes the famous statement of, "I regret that I have only one life to live to give to my country." And some people say that he never said it, that it was really propaganda put on by George Washington. Some other people say, yeah, he really did say it. So you got to research it and decide for yourself. So anyway, so not much is going on. Washington is up here in Harlem Heights. The British are down here. So the British start moving up. They send a little force coming up here, and they come up like this. Washington is up on this hill, this big hill here, and he sends some troops down to check them out. And so what happens is those forces start fighting, and the Americans start to retreat this way. And so Washington, in a brilliant move, sends more troops this way, and he sends one company or regiment around this way. This is the British over in here, to flank them. And the flanking doesn't, because he wants to cut them off and just capture them. The flanking doesn't happen because the Americans start firing too soon and the British start to retreat. So now Washington sends another company down, and they're pushing the British. Now this is all downhill, so he has a bird's eye view of what's going on. And they're pushing the British back and back and back. Finally, the British send up some new troops, and it's a win for the Americans and a defeat for the British. And they just kind of retreat back. Washington's afraid that his men are going to get too far down and the British are going to overtake them. So he recalls all of his troops back. The British go this way, and they actually sit that way for about 3 or 4 weeks, trying to figure out what's going on. So what happens is General Howe says, well, I'm going to get one on him. Loads a bunch of his guys up onto ships and brings them up to a place what is now called Merrimack. And it's on the north shore of Long Island Sound. And his plan is to come in from the back and get Washington. Washington gets word of this, and he decides, well, I'm not getting caught here. And he takes off, and he goes to White Plains, New York, right up here. So now Hal is here, and he's running into a lot of interference. There's a lot of sharpshooters and some good guys over here. 500 guys keeping 4,000 from moving along the roads, and so that really slows Hal down. Hal ends up going this way now that he knows that Washington is no longer at Harlem Heights, and these guys, they have a battle, and this wasn't a retreat. This was called a alteration of position, because Washington did not want to say he was retreating because he had very low morale. And if he says we're retreating, they're going to say, oh, again, and these guys are going to start quitting again. And they're leaving as it is. They're leaving 30, 40, 50 a day. So anyway, they get to White Plains. They have another battle in White Plains. And this is kind of a draw. The British overrun some of the positions. There's a hill over here. The Hessians are really the ones that take it. The militia go, the Continentals go, and they kind of retreat on out. And so Washington now says, I got to get out of town. So he sends Nat Green with about 2,000 men to Fort Washington. And this is in November now. And Washington goes up to Peekskill, which is about 25 miles north of White Plains. And he crosses over the Hudson River. And then he's in New Jersey, and he comes down to Fort Lee. Okay? Hal is now here in White Plains. He sends a company of his soldiers, about 4,000 of them, to Fort Washington. They end up surrendering and losing the fort just because it was indefensible with the number of men they had. And they lost about 2,800 men. Some of them were killed, not very many. But they lost a bunch of munitions and stuff like that. So the British then move over, and they take Washington leaves. He knows that the British are coming, and he leaves Fort Lee and starts his trip across New Jersey, which we'll talk about. Fort Lee is abandoned, and the British just walk right in and take it. The Americans lose all kinds of armaments. They lose cannon, they lose gunpowder, they lose stores and munitions. And that gets us, with Washington leaving, that gets us out of Manhattan and starting to cross New Jersey into Pennsylvania. And we will talk about that at our next lesson. So hopefully you don't have any questions. We're out of New York. Have a good night, and we'll see you tomorrow.